The night I found my sister in my bed, my husband wasn't even the most shocking part of what I discovered. It was the second phone I found under her pillow the next morning, and the 3 years of messages on it that proved this had never been about a broken heart from her divorce at all. My name is Jennifer, and for 3 years, I shared my home with my own sister, believing I was helping her rebuild her life after a painful divorce. What I didn't know was that she had already picked out exactly which life she wanted to rebuild it in. Mine? Before I tell you what was on that second phone. And trust me, it gets worse before it gets better. Go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe if you believe family loyalty should mean something. Because by the end of this story, you're going to understand exactly how far some people are willing to go to take what isn't theirs. My sister Danielle is 4 years younger than me, and growing up, I always felt protective of her. Our parents weren't easy people to grow up with. A lot of yelling, a lot of favoritism toward our older brother, and somewhere in the middle of that chaos, Danielle and I became each other's safe place. When she called me crying one night, telling me her marriage was falling apart and she had nowhere to go, I didn't think twice, just for a few months, until she got back on her feet. My husband, Marcus, and I had been married for 7 years at that point. We had a spare bedroom we mostly used for storage, and it took us a weekend to clear it out and make it feel like a real space for her. Danielle showed up with 2 suitcases and a face that looked like it hadn't stopped crying in weeks. I remember hugging her at the door and telling her she never had to feel alone again, that this was her home for as long as she needed it. Those first few months were exactly what I expected them to be. Danielle was quiet, understandably fragile, spending a lot of time in her room. Marcus was patient with her, the way I hoped he would be, checking in on her, making sure she ate, including her in our weekend plans so she wouldn't feel like a burden. I remember feeling grateful, genuinely grateful, that my husband was the kind of man who would open our home to my sister without a single complaint. Around month 4, something started to shift, though I didn't have the language for it at the time. Danielle stopped talking about her divorce, stopped talking about finding her own apartment. She started talking instead about how comfortable she felt with us, how she didn't know if she was ready to go back to living alone. I told her there was no rush. I meant it. I had no idea I was slowly signing away the next 3 years of my marriage without realizing it. By the 6-month mark, the small things started piling up in a way I only recognize clearly now, looking backward. Marcus started remembering details about Danielle's day that I hadn't told him, which meant they'd been talking without me. She started cooking his favorite meals on nights I worked late. Meals I hadn't even known were his favorites until she made them. She started borrowing small amounts of my perfume, my favorite sweater once. Small things I brushed off as a little sister admiring her big sister, the way she always had growing up. I want to be honest with you here, because I think about this a lot. There was a night, almost a full year in, when I came home early from a work trip, and found the 2 of them sitting a little too close on the couch, laughing at something in a way that made me feel like I'd walked in on the middle of a conversation I wasn't part of. I asked about it. Marcus said they were just talking about my birthday, planning a surprise. I believed him, because the alternative, the idea that my husband and my own sister could be capable of what I eventually learned, wasn't something my mind was prepared to consider. The months turned into a second year, and Danielle still hadn't moved out. She had a decent job by then, enough to afford her own place easily, but every time I gently brought it up, she had a new reason to stay a little longer. I stopped pushing. Some parts of me, the same part that had protected her our entire childhood, told myself she just needed more time, more healing, more of the safety our own house had never quite given us growing up. There's a specific memory that haunts me more than almost any other from that second year, one I didn't understand the weight of until much later. Daniela had started going to the gym with Marcus on Saturday mornings, something that began as her wanting to get out of the house more, clear her head after the divorce. I used to wake up alone those mornings, make myself coffee, and feel proud of both of them. Proud that my husband was patient enough to help my sister find her footing again. Proud that Danielle was finally showing signs of getting her strength back. I used to tell my coworkers how lucky I was to have a husband who cared about my family the way he cared about his own. I cringe now thinking about how many times I said that out loud, not knowing what those Saturday mornings were actually becoming. It was the 3rd year, almost exactly 3 years, to the week she'd first shown up with those 2 suitcases, when I woke up at 2 in the morning to get a glass of water and found our bedroom door standing open in a way it never was. Marcus's side of the bed was empty. Primera told myself in that half-asleep haze that he'd probably fallen asleep on the couch, working late. I walked down the hallway toward the living room first, and it was empty too. Then I turned toward Danielle's room. I'm not going to describe every detail of what I found when I opened that door, because I think you can imagine it well enough. What I will tell you is that neither of them heard me standing there for almost a full minute before. Marcus finally looked up and saw my face in the doorway. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember much of the next hour at all. If I'm honest, what I do remember is sitting on my bathroom floor at 4 a.m, unable to process that the two people I trusted most in the entire world had been building an entire secret life inside the walls of my own home. Here's where this story takes a turn I don't think you're expecting, because what I found the next morning made the affair feel almost like the smaller betrayal. While Danielle was in the shower, refusing to look at me, I went into her room to start pulling her things together, wanting her out of my house within the hour. Under her pillow, I found a second phone, one I'd never seen her use, fully charged, unlocked, sitting right there like she hadn't even bothered to hide it well. What was on that phone changed everything I thought I understood about the last 3 years. There were messages between Danielle and Marcus dating back almost 4 years, nearly a full year before her divorce was even finalized, and almost 2 full years before she ever moved into our house. In those messages, they weren't just flirting, they were planning. Danielle had orchestrated the entire end of her own marriage, specifically because she'd fallen for Marcus first, long before her divorce. And the crying phone call asking to stay with us for a few months hadn't been a desperate woman with nowhere else to go. It had been a plan, timed carefully, to get herself inside my home under the cover of being a broken-hearted sister I would never think to doubt. If you're sitting there in disbelief right now, drop a comment and tell me honestly, could you have caught something like this happening under your own roof? Because looking back at 3 years of small warning signs I explained away out of love and trust, I still ask myself that same question. And if this story is hitting close to home for you, share it with someone who needs the reminder that betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. I confronted both of them together that morning, phone in hand, and for the first time in 3 years, neither of them had an excuse. Ready? Marcus tried to explain that things had, in his words, developed slowly over time, as if 4 years of secret messages before his own sister-in-law even moved in could be explained away as something that simply happened. Danielle didn't even bother with that. She told me, almost coldly, that she'd always felt like she deserved a life like mine, and that she wasn't sorry for finally taking one. The divorce from Marcus took 8 months to finalize. Because I had documentation of the affair predating both her divorce and the birth of our own financial decisions during that time. Including money I later discovered Marcus had quietly funneled to help Danielle with legal fees during her split from her ex. My lawyer built a case that resulted in a settlement far more favorable to me than I expected going in. I kept the house. I kept the retirement accounts we'd built together over 7 years. Marcus walked away with considerably less than he assumed he would, and considerably less than Danielle apparently believed she was signing up for when she chose him. As for Danielle, I haven't spoken to her since that morning, and I don't intend to. Our parents, when they found out, reacted in the exact fractured way our childhood always warned me they would, with my mother quietly suggesting I should try to forgive family, as if what happened had been a misunderstanding rather than a calculated 4-year plan. My father, true to form, said almost nothing at all, which somehow hurt more than if he'd taken a side. I stopped waiting for anyone else to understand the weight of what I'd lost. I started rebuilding on my own terms instead. A few months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into an old mutual friend at the grocery store who mentioned, almost in passing, that Danielle and Marcus had already broken up themselves. Barely 5 months after everything came out into the open, apparently, without the secrecy holding it together, without the thrill of something forbidden, whatever they had didn't survive contact with an ordinary, everyday relationship. I won't pretend that didn't give me a small, quiet satisfaction I'm not entirely proud of, but I also didn't let it become something I dwelt on. Their ending wasn't really my story to carry anymore. The house feels different now. Quieter in a way that used to scare me and now feels like peace. I repainted the spare bedroom, the one Danielle used to sleep in, a soft, warm yellow, and I turned it into a small home studio where I've started writing again. Something I loved before marriage and work slowly buried it. I adopted a dog 8 months ago, something Marcus never wanted, and having her greet me at the door every single day has done more for my sense of home than either of them ever did in that final year. I also started something I never expected to need: a weekly session with a therapist who specializes in family betrayal. And it was there I finally understood why I missed so many signs over those 3 years. She explained that the mind protects itself from suspecting the people we've built our deepest trust with, especially family, because the alternative feels too destabilizing to even consider. It wasn't that I was careless. It was that Danielle and Marcus had specifically counted on that exact blind spot and used my love for both of them as the very tool that let their plan work for as long as it did. People ask me sometimes if I regret opening my home to my sister that first night she called crying. And the truth is, I don't regret the person I was for saying yes. I regret trusting blindly for 3 straight years without ever questioning the version of events I was being fed by 2 people who had already decided, long before I found that second phone, exactly how this story was going to end for them. What I've learned since is that real loyalty doesn't need a second phone hidden under a pillow. It doesn't need years of careful lying to maintain itself. The people who actually deserve your trust are the ones who never make you question it in the first place. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe so you catch the next one, and let me know in the comments what you would have done the moment you found that second phone. Stories like this need to be heard. So if you know someone who's ever trusted the wrong person under their own roof, send this their way. I'll see you in the next one.